Right, episode 8, hard to believe. We're moving on fairly quick, and thanks to all who subscribed, who liked, who shared. It's like the views are off the charts. I think it's been up like 500 views in the last 3 days. So thanks a million for that. Um, Now, this video is fairly special to me, and there's 2 or 3 guys I want to mention in this video because I wouldn't be here today, or we wouldn't have these videos without them. So the first man to mention would be Mark Scott and Amanda, his partner. Now, I bought this cylinder head about, I think, 8 or 9 years ago. Now, I had dealt with Mark before. Again, this isn't a plug to Mark. He's not sponsoring the channel. I don't get money off him. Sadly, all my money goes to him. But he sold me the first Formula One part I've ever bought, which was I think it was a push rod off a Honda, can't remember what car, but it got me on the ladder for writing and for general interest and all this kind of thing. Up to that, I'd been studying, you know, as much as I could get in terms of performance engines, like Honda's, Ferrari engines, Lamborghini engines, but they weren't Formula One at the same time. So this, as I said, was the second part I bought off him. Now, at the time it came up, I think it was about €1,000 at the time. It's off a V10 Brian Hart engine, which what I call the 1030 engine, which would be a V10 and 3 litre. Now, at the time, I just bought the cylinder head off Mark, and bare cylinder head, no pneumatic valve train, nothing like that. But it was a ginormous moment for me in terms of, stepping forward and being able to share what we have today. Now, the head itself isn't that different to what we have in the last naturally aspirated engines, we'd say in the Cosworth V10 TJ or the V8 CA. Port shape is nearly identical, but there is a few differences with the pneumatic valve train, which I'll go through now, which will then lead on to another story, how I got that and meeting more people, but hopefully we'll get through it. So when I bought this head, it was that long, and I chopped it up into parts to see what was going on inside, and in reality it's not a whole pile different to a normal road car head internally, but there are some differences. So we'll hopefully talk through them now and have a look at what's going on. So when I bought the head, just put that aside for a moment. When I bought the head, as you can imagine, sorry, this way, it was a cylinder head, obviously, and it was all together. So I chopped it all up. That will go in there, and this will go here. So it was all sectioned to display what was going on inside and how it was all laid out. So if we put those aside for a moment and look at this part, which is the major part. So I've seen about, I think, I don't know what, from, as I said, Volkswagen Golfs to Hondas to, Ford Escort race engines, Fiat race engines, Ferrari engines, Lamborghini engines. I've seen inside all their cylinder heads, and here we are at Formula One, which I would consider the pinnacle of design and head flow, valve train actuation, all that sort of thing. Now, even though this is an old cylinder head, the ports are almost identical to the Cosworth engines, which will be the TJ V10 and the CA V8. I've taken port models of both, which are these here, which you basically, cap off this, you pour silicone in here, and it sets, you take it out. Now, in terms of the port models themselves, I mean, they're as, if you were to ask a child to draw a cylinder head port, not, putting down the engineers at Brian Hart Engineers or at Cosworth, but they're as you would draw them. You know, they haven't got any funky, you know, you'd be reading on the forums that, oh, it's supposed to be tulipped here, or a different grit sandpaper here, and smoother here, so the fuel atomizes when it lodges here. Um, or, you know, this is supposed to be necked in like a Venturi. They're as you would draw them, you know. Now, if I flip it over here this way where it's cut in half, I mean, the intake port is pretty much straight. There's nothing fancy going on here. It goes on to the valve seat, which is a three-angled cut. Um, Same with the exhaust. There's nothing crazy, you know, no fancy shapes or anything. In terms of diameter, it's pretty much the same all the way in. So we don't have anything crazy like you'd read on the forums, you know, that this guy poured and polished my cylinder head and it's making 40 horsepower more. It's not. That's nonsense. All you need to make sure is that on the exhaust or the intake, that like in a road car, sometimes the which would not allow you to do it, the intake port would come in at that angle here, which would leave a pretty terrible short side radius here. And as your gases are coming in, if your gases are coming in, let's draw this really badly, they come in here like this and they don't flow against that surface. So what happens is they flow out here and you've got a load of turbulence here on the short side radius. So all you really want to make sure of is, if you're porting ahead or designing ahead, that this radius here is nice and swept down to the seat, as is this and this. But in terms of necking it in for torque or other nonsense, surface, like the what do they call it online, the golf ball dimple effect, that's nonsense. Forget about that. So that's the port model and the combustion chamber as well. So this engine made, the Hart engine made, I think off the top of my head, 715 horsepower. Now, at the time, which was 1995, I think it was Minardi, when he sold out to Minardi, or Arrows or Minardi, I can't remember. He designed this and sold it to those, or supplied it to those guys, and they ran it. Now, it didn't win anything, but that's irrelevant. You know, it could be the driver or it could be other parts of the engine. But this engine was very important in terms of, you know, what I think, and in terms of what I see now currently in Formula One, in the Cosworth engines, which aren't a lot different. The port shape in the Cosworth engine is almost identical. The exhaust, fair enough, is a small bit angled upward like that, but diameters, you know, radius, valve seat angles, combustion chamber, all the same, nearly exactly. So if we take a look at a cutout, which this would have sat in here, by the way, that would go in here between those. If I can just squeeze it in again, hopefully it'll go in. So that'll sit down there. So hopefully you can see that. Just let me have a glance. Yeah, perfect. So that's where that sits. And if I flip it over, you can see here. Now again, the Cosworth, my own TJ Cosworth V10 is identical. I'll call it, it might be like 0.2 of a mil different here in diameter, but in terms of angle, it's identical. Exhaust port, identical. Now again, the TJ might be slightly higher up like that, which would just ease this radius here, but again, that's not, you know, not necessarily a flow issue. It could be just a packaging issue with the exhaust. So yeah, that was fairly interesting to discover that, what, 10 years on, it's the same. So if I take that out again, hopefully it'll come out. We'll have a closer look at this. So again, this surface here, which you'd hear guys raving on about online, you know, that this should be rougher to atomize the fuel, and up here should be ahead of the injector should be smoother to let in the air, smoother nonsense. Um, this head and the Cosworth head were all smooth to about what I'd say 400, 600 paper. It's nothing amazing, you know. You can see now there is a bit of a shine off it, but it's not. It hasn't got anything funky going on. That's the spark plug. I'll show you that in a sec. So you can see it there. Now, in terms of diameter, which was asked, we'll just get a rough call on the ratio. So the counter bore here, or the seat, will go into, let's call it 38. That's the intake. And on the exhaust, let's call it 32. Now, it was asked, it'll just save answering comments or putting more pictures up. So that's pretty much that. Now, the spark plug, I've done an article before online with the spark plug. They're standard enough. This isn't the plug out of this engine. As you can see, the threads are way too long. They're all surface mount, which is, now this plug has been cut, I'll show you in a second, but it's surface mount, as you can see there. So it's got no electrode like your common car, you know, it's coming up here, or even for them. Because in a Formula 1 engine, the combustion chamber is so small and so compact, it has to be kept flat. And as well as that, the electrodes don't provide a zone that would cause ignition. Like if the electrodes were to glow hot, it could cause pre-ignition. So they're just flat surface mount. So hopefully you can get a good shot of that if I stay out of the light. So that's how that works. It sparks from the tip to the side. Now if I screw this out, you'll be able to see what's going on there. So very shallow. That's the way to be if it wasn't if it wasn't cut. Again, sparks from the tip to the outer edge, and no hot zones. It's all cooled by the cylinder head. So that's the plug, Champion. And again, a special tool to go down here, because it has to go down the bore all the way to reach it. So getting back to the roots of this head, or why I think it's very special. So as I said, I bought this head off Mark Scott, and it didn't have any internals in it, pneumatics. So I then went searching online to find a pneumatic assembly for this head, and I searched, I think, for about 7 months, and I eventually came across a Hart engine that was for sale, which was a 1030 engine. It was for sale in Derbyshire in the UK, and the guy that was selling it was not that awful well at the moment, or at that time, and his sales were being handled by a guy called, what was his name, Peter Morley in the Netherlands. So I contacted Peter, and he relayed the information to this guy in Derby, and the guy turned out to be Peter Cowman, which sadly passed away in March, I think it was March 2020, which was either during or the start of COVID. I just want to block COVID out of my mind. But Roger was a total gentleman. At the time I met him, I think he was just getting Alzheimer's, so his sales were being handled by, again, Peter Morley in the Netherlands. So I contacted Peter, and he said, yeah, we've got Roger's got a Hart V10 engine for sale, and he would sell any parts of it. So I said, right, got on a plane and landed into East Midlands Airport, got a taxi with one of Roger's friends who he had organised, and saw the engine in Roger's workshop. So went in, stripped the pneumatic parts out of the engine, and I was delighted. I couldn't believe it when I saw them. It was just like, alien technology to see the pneumatic valve part in front of me. And again, at the time, Roger, I've since been I've seen on Facebook, his daughter Sophie has got a Memorial Day in, I think, Derbyshire in about 3 weeks' time for Roger, because everything, with COVID and all that, they hadn't got a proper celebration. So I'm going to go to it and just pay the respects to Sophie and all that, because without Roger, I wouldn't be doing these. So a legend of a man. He started, I think in 19 or what, like 50 years back, and started in Formula 3, worked up to Formula 1 or Formula 2, Formula 1. I think Perry McCarthy, which was the original Top Gear Stig, worked for him, or he was a driver for Roger. So just a gentleman, But anyway, came away with the pneumatic valve part, which is the earliest one I could find, which is this part here. So this part, as you've seen in the first video, the Cosworth item has got a lot smaller, and it's now in steel, aluminium, and a steel liner, but this was totally made in aluminium. Now, as far as I know, I just zoom in, this part was bought off Del West in the US, which I remember contacting them years ago. I just sent them an email to try and contact them about, the technology and what's behind Formula 1 engines, and they basically said, no, we're not going to tell you anything, that what do you need to know this for, or why are you contacting us? So I said, right, I'll find another way to show the technology off, which I did eventually 10 years later. Anyway, so this was an off-the-shelf part. This is the outer cylinder. So you can see the hole in there for the air. These are bolt holes. It was fairly cumbersome. It had a lot of O-rings here, which would bolt down to the head there. You can see the airway here at 3 o'clock, which would be fed by this airway here. And again, which I don't ever like, which I mentioned before, is the bolts holding it. They're only going through 3 millimeters and then in and into the head. Now, if you look back at the first video, the Cosworth items have got M4s, and I think they're about, they're 40 mil long, which allows the bolts to stretch to be able to pre-tension them. You can't get pre-tension on short bolts. So I think that the main failure mode of this engine was these bolts here vibrated loose, and you lost your air seal, and that was that. But to go back to Del West and the parts that Brian had bought, Brian Hart, for this engine, these at the time were off the shelf. Again, it's hard anodized, and the inside as well is PTFE coated. You can see the shine there, hopefully. Yeah, there. Now, from what I gather in his workshop, he turned these down on the outside, which was fun, I'd say, cutting through the hard anodize, to allow the solid lifters to pass over them like that. Now, as you know, you've all seen these. The solid lifter would go in here and was driven by the camshaft. Now, in this head, obviously being Formula 1, everything was fairly tight. So they machined away the head here to let the cam pass, as you can see there. Now, another thing with this head was, if I can just take that out again, this is a normal shim on valve. So you'd build up your valve, put the shim on top, and then put this down, and the shim would sit there, and you set your clearances, which is standard. This head had valves, which hopefully I can show you this with the Sharpie. The valves are angled as well this way in this head, so that made the distance from when the valve would open, because it was a compound angle both that way, which would be that way, and this way. The valve would move away from the bore as it would open, so there would be no bore shrouding, which is a big problem. So if you've just a parallel valve like that, when the valve opens, it opens tight to the bore wall here, which stops the air coming in quick, and it just leads to lesser flow. But that was a fairly compact or complex cylinder head for grinding. If you look at it, the lobes had to be ground that way and that way, so that was great fun. But getting back to the head itself, so when I got this head, as I said, I had never seen a Formula One part before, which was anyway complicated, and I had no idea how it was oiled until about a week later, which it came to me. So the camshaft in this engine, if you notice there's a tiny little hole which supplies oil. Let's just get the marker. So there's a little hole here which feeds the oil into these copper squirters, which are there and there. Now this is a turn part, and it's inserted into drilling that way, and again drilled in there, and this is copper because these have to be bent to face onto the face of this here, the interface. So they sprayed oil down here where the camshaft rubbed off the solid tappets. Now I studied this head every way, upside down, inside out, and I couldn't figure out how the oil got to here. And obviously now it's very simple. The camshaft was oiled in the middle. So on the Hart engine, the hollow camshaft had oil in the center of it, which would then go out here into these drillings. There was a relief cut around here in the camshaft, which would feed these. So that was a major head scratch for quite a long time, about I think a week, of how oil got in here. Again, when you don't see the whole assembly, or when you've never seen it before, you know, you're just on your own and you have to figure it out. But it came to me eventually, and that's how it's done. So this technology is kind of not really used anymore, because you've got a whole mass of oil here then in the camshaft, which is fairly high up in the engine, which takes up room, or not room, but takes up mass, should I say, and the center of gravity is raised by the oil in the camshaft. So on the Cosworth, my Cosworth TJ engine, the camshaft is hollow and there's no oil in it. It's just oil conventionally, you know, like a normal car engine from drillings here. So what I'm going to do now is pause the video, because we're about halfway. It makes it way easier for me to upload them and to edit them, and we'll dive into the water jackets in the next part. So I'll chat in a sec. So okay, onto the coolant jacket and the waterways. Now again, it's very important to note, this is an old cylinder head, V10, as I said, Brian Hart. The port shape is almost identical to the Cosworth, both the V10 and the V8. Now, like, if you want to make power from an engine, it's not always necessarily in the port shape. It's about all the other parts, how quick you can spin it, how well, you know, these seals cope, which they improved a lot with the Cosworth parts, how well your oiling holds up, a load of other stuff. So it's not usually down to the port shape, which you know, a lot of people get very hell-bent on, you know, oh, it's the port shape, or it's this, that, the other. It's not, generally not that at all. Now the combustion chamber shape has come on a lot in years, that's fair enough, but in terms of port shape and general castings, they're all the same. Now my own head, or I've got as you know, I've got my own TJ engine, and I've got, I think, 2 or 3 CAVA Cosworth heads here as well, which I don't want to cut up because they cost like a fortune. Um, I think now, like for a CA or a TJ head, they're up on like €15,000. So I won't be cutting those. Um, but it's like the technology is the same inside the head. Um, if we look at the board shape, now one thing with Formula One engines and mass produced engines is they're generally not that worried about efficiency in terms of, you know, the lifespan of the car over 30 years, how well it's going to perform, or the heat rejection into the coolant and all that sort of thing. Like these engines do, I think, like 1600 kilometers and then they're binned. So they're not awfully worried about how much heat is being taken from the engine or how much heat isn't. Um, so the galleries tend to be a lot bigger around the exhaust ports, which you can see here. Now, just to, before we go into this, um, again, the machining of this part, you know, they're very small numbers, so you can see a lot of core shift, which I'll talk about in the next video. But basically, when a sand mold is built, it's built with all the sand parts, which form the gallery, which will be this part here. That'll be a sand part. The outsides, you know, all the other parts, and these cores can shift like this in the mold, which results in the walls here being thicker or thinner, which you can see that one is very thin there. Now again, it's up to the machinist, you know, where he picks up. I think this was at the end where the cylinder head would expand most or contract most when it solidifies, so we'll give the machinist a bit of credit. But if you look here, you can see that's 5 millimeters thick, and you're down to 2 millimeters thick there, which is, you know, borderline. But so again, they're not mass produced items, is what I want to say really. This here, like, would be a waste of aluminium. If it was a road car, you don't really want to be, you know, making millions of these heads or pouring them, and then again machining away all this. So you want to keep your well, it wouldn't be machined at all, it would just as cast in a road car, but you don't want waste. So in Formula One, they're not that worried about these type of things, but that was cutting it fine there, you know. So if we look at the coolant gallery, now this model was cast inside this head and then it was cut. So this will give you an idea of what the coolant gallery looks like. Again, this is the intake side, this is the exhaust. So they put a huge amount of effort into, if I just bring this back here, and hopefully this will fit onto it, which it should. Put that in there, and that in there. So that would all sit like that. Now, again, this is a V engine. So your valley would be here, the other cylinder would be here, and the intake side would be here, and the exhaust would be here. So they put a huge amount of effort into cooling around the exhaust. So this is all water or coolant. They put a huge amount of cooling effort into the exhaust areas, as you can see. Even between the ports, there's a bridge there as well, where it cools the area between the exhaust valves. You just don't want this getting hot, you know. So it's pretty elaborate. And again, there would be 5 of these, you know, along the cylinder head. So that's how it would sit. Again, the deck surface, which would be, this is the exhaust. So this would be here. I can just fit it in. Yeah, so you can see the holes there. So I'll fit it in roughly. That would be the deck surface there on the exhaust side. So that is reading what? 10 mil. So it's quite a lot of coolant around around the spark plug. Now the next video which I'm going to do, which will be episode 9, is going to concern how they cast a cylinder head without issues. So if you cast a head, just to get into it briefly, so if we look at this here, these are all very thin, all thin areas. Alright, if we look at this is very thin, again it's all very thin, but the main area which is very thick is where the spark plug would sit. So this would all be solid. So this is a danger area with every head, in that it's a huge mass of aluminium which is the last to solidify. So these will all dry or solidify quicker, and this will solidify last. So the danger of that is that when these solidify, they're all fine, all gone hard or solidified. This will still be molten. So as this is cooling, this will shrink and it will tear away from the areas here which are already solidified. Now I don't really want to get into that in this video, but it's a huge problem area here. That's the most mass in a cylinder head. It's just around the spark plug in all heads. So I'll cover that in the next video of why that's an issue, how they got around it, and how you don't have a failure here where they're where this is trying to take aluminium from the solidified area as it's shrinking. So let's just put that in the next video, and we'll talk about that after a while. So getting on to the intake side, again, as I said, the intake side isn't cooled with the bridge, because you've got incoming air. It's cold air incoming, and it cools this naturally. Again, huge amount of water here around the plug, top of the combustion chamber, which would be this area here. That divot there actually is just a mold I put in where the spark plug would sit. It was just to block the hole when I was pouring it. That goes in there again, hopefully. Yeah. So that's where the plug would sit, and a lot of coolant around there. The exhausts, again, in here between them. Huge amount of coolant needed. I mean, 715 horsepower, you need a lot of thermal takeaway. So if we look at the intake again, because I haven't covered it that much, again, I can put this part on here, which was cut from this is the exact part that was cut from this cylinder head. So this side here is the intake. Again, knife edge here, lovely, grand flow. But in terms of shapes or valleys or smooth, it's almost straight. There's nothing fancy. Just let me get a zoom in on that. It's very nearly straight. So again, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but it's pretty much a straight line into the port. So in terms of air control in the port, so both the obviously there's 4 valves. They both converge into one area here. Now this part is off my own engine, which is the intake barrel, which you've seen before. So if I just swoop by the camera, you can see there's 10 cylinders. This would be the top side, or the intake side. Again, it's supported here by their truss bearings. They're actually machined from, I think, Peak, which will be plastic. So that sits in a bearing assembly. And again, there was an encoder drive here, so that drives an encoder. This coating here is just an anti-friction coating, so that when you would brake, when the car would brake or when it accelerated, that there was no axial fretting on these surfaces here. So this is called, I think, Graphal, which is a coating which you see on piston skirts as well, the green coating. It's just an anti-friction coating. I think it's loaded with graphene, Teflon, and just a carrier and a colour, just that you know it's done. So that's what that part looks like. Again, huge value. Cast magnesium and then machined afterwards. So you'll always know magnesium because it's got like a rainbow colour. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, you can see it there. So yeah, very lightweight, very strong. I mean, it's literally, it's nothing, you know, to hold it. But again, beautiful part. And cast and post machine there. You can probably see the machining marks there. You can just see them there. And I think it probably got a rub of like a die grinder just to smooth them off. But this part then, obviously this is off my own engine, which was a slightly different bore spacing, so it's not going to fit into the Hart engine exactly, but it'll show you how it worked. So that would sit in there, and that would be wide open throttle, WOT or what, and as you close it, it would shut off the air. So if you want to, on idle, you know, it'll let in a small bit, or sorry, it'll be this way. On idle, it'll let in a tiny bit of air there, and as you rev it, it would open the barrels up. Again, very simple, you know, can't really go wrong. There's no linkages as much, you know, like butterflies or throttle valves. Fairly foolproof, lightweight, minimal parts, just one part, and this then would be driven here nearly in the center off a hydraulic rotary actuator. Now I haven't got this part on hand, but I'll put a link down below to show you that actuator and how it works off my own engine. I did write up it on before, so you can have a read of that if you want. The reason was hydraulic because the thing with hydraulic actuators is they're, what would I call it? In terms of power to weight ratio, they're very good. They're high power density. Like if you had to control this with, I don't know, cables or with pneumatics or with an electric servo or solenoid, it'd weigh way more. So with hydraulics, rotary actuator, very lightweight, controlled with a Moog, solenoid valve, and you know, you can basically have any resolution you want in terms of idle or full revs for a lightweight package. So that's down the link. You can read all about it there, and that's how that's controlled. Obviously there'd be two of these with the in the valley, and when you rev the car, they'd rev like that. So that's that part. Now I think we're near the end of this video. Is there anything else just while I'm chatting? So again, these are cylinder head parts. Just let me have a look. I don't think there is. Again, like in terms of port shape, there is just one definitive port shape really for a V10 of this horsepower, and you know, it's this one here. It's the same, it's almost the same identically as the Cosworth and the V10 and the V8, almost identical. You know, as I said, on the TJ, this is probably about 5 degrees higher. There's nothing different in terms of the combustion chamber. You can actually see, you might be able to see them. You can even see the tooling marks on the chamber, hopefully. Maybe not. Yeah, you can see them there. But again, nothing different. You know, in terms of, now I know the TJ engine was, I think, 900 horsepower, but that wasn't because of port shape. That was because of reliability. Otherwise, you know, in other areas, conrod mass, piston crown shape, general reliability through the engine, that you could spin it quicker. These again, like, I mean, you can see there yourself, these were a major, I won't say a flaw because like it was a long time ago, but there's just a lot going on there, you know. And the seal surface, as you can see there, if you're a machinist, it's not brilliant. You know, the nitrogen would leak there a lot. It's not at all spectacular. So I think in the early days, the main engine failures were these. Like, you can have 1,000 horsepower if you want, but if it's, you know, going to break down after 10 minutes, it's no good. But they were a very early part. I think they originated from the Peugeot engine, which was the Peugeot V10 or V12 way back in '85. It was an idea that Del West copied, but again, hugely important to me in terms of getting me on this journey. The people I bought the head from, Roger, who I bought this part from, I remember arriving back to the hotel at Donington Park, which is now closed, sadly. The museum is closed, and just been amazed that I had this in my hand and nobody else had seen it, you know. Now, you can say, like, geez, what is it? Like, it's just part of an engine, but hugely important, because I think, as you all know, the natural aspirated engines are never coming back. We'll probably be forced down a hybrid rabbit hole, which we're going now, even with my own car, which is the last of the BMW straight sixes. We're never going to see that again, you know. And it's, I won't say it's sad, it's, you know, progression, but it has to be documented, because what's here on the bench, or what they did, it's just, you know, it's amazing, to get that power from engines. And the people that ran them, the different characters, the people you'd meet, the people even that worked in the foundries, you know, this was probably made by hand, the patterns. So that's all gone, but not to be reminiscent or anything like that, but it's just an end of an era. So that's kind of the reason too why I want to bring on all this natural aspirated stuff. And I will probably never have an interest in new Formula 1 cars, the turbo, you know, they've got electronic, regen. It's just all, I don't know, it's just too much. It's not as pure as it should be, I think. But that's this video. In the next video, I'll be showing you casting technical problems or issues with this area here, which is a huge issue. Like that will be that way, sorry, this way. This area here, I'm going to go through and show you something remarkable which I discovered a long time ago, which has helped me simulate flow in castings and solidification in high performance castings like this, something I discovered. So it'll be of interest, and be sure and watch it. And again, thanks for everyone for subscribing. Thanks to everyone for subscribing, for buying me coffees, for buying parts. It's why I'm doing them, you know. It's not for the money, it's because I just want to share it, and sometimes you just need a bit of a kick to take the parts down. I mean, I have hundreds of parts here from all years. Sometimes you need a bit of a kick to take the parts down off the shelf and to just share it all, because it's just not going to happen anywhere else. This part actually is for sale in the link up there, buy me coffee. I think it's 50 quid. It's a beautiful part, and again, only one in the world. I've never seen it, I think, a Brian Hart engine for sale since, and probably never will. Again, I probably won't sell these because they're not as nice, but look, I might, I don't know. So yeah, that is that. I shall talk to you in episode 9.